The clinking of silverware stopped. All eyes turned to my father at the head of the table. It was Sunday brunch, a family tradition I'd grown to dread. He cleared his throat, a sound that always meant a pronouncement was coming. "Let's be honest," he began, his voice booming in the sudden quiet. "Nicole has nothing going for her." A wave of ice washed over me. My own father. The words hung in the air, heavy and cruel. I saw my aunts freeze, their forks midway to their mouths. My uncle stared at his plate. My pulse roared in my ears, a mix of shock and white-hot anger. He sat back, a smug smile on his face, believing he'd stated a simple, undeniable fact. He had no idea the fire he'd just lit inside me. The silence was suffocating. Around the table, my family refused to meet my eyes. My Aunt Sylvia fiddled with her napkin, her gaze darting everywhere but at me. My cousin Peter studied the ceiling as if it were fascinating. I felt their pity, their discomfort, and it stung worse than the insult. Then, I caught my cousin Ellen's glance. Her eyes held not pity, but a flash of fierce solidarity. It was a tiny anchor. My father wasn't finished. "She'll never manage anything meaningful financially," he added, slicing into his steak. "No head for real business." That was the final push. The humiliation solidified into something harder, pure, cold determination. I said nothing. I just looked at him, and in that moment, I silently vowed he would regret every word. 2 days later, my phone rang. It was Martin, my financial advisor, his tone uncharacteristically urgent. "Nicole, we need to talk. In person." An hour later, in his quiet office, he slid a folder toward me. "Your grandmother's estate was finalized years ago, but there was a contingent trust," he explained. "It matured on your 30th birthday. You've inherited a dormant stock portfolio." The numbers on the page blurred. It was a small fortune. My father had been the executor. He'd never mentioned this. "There's more," Martin said, pointing. "One holding is a significant, non-voting stake in Franklin Holdings." My breath hitched. Franklin Holdings was the investment arm that funded my father's pride and joy, his company, Sterling Designs. A spark of fierce hope ignited. This wasn't just money. This was leverage. I spent the next week buried in research. Sterling Designs was successful, but Martin connected me with Arthur, a retired, ethical business strategist. "Your father is a bulldozer, Nicole," Arthur warned over coffee. "Charming to investors, ruthless to obstacles. He'll see you as an obstacle if he finds out." He taught me to read between the lines of annual reports, to understand shareholder influence. The non-voting shares were key, they gave me financial stake but no direct say. Yet. "You need allies before you make a move," Arthur advised. "Quiet, powerful allies." I left our meeting with a clear, careful plan forming. I wouldn't act in anger. I would be smarter, quieter, and more patient than he could ever imagine. The following Sunday dinner was another test. "So, Nicole," my father began, his voice dripping with false concern. "Found a proper career path yet? Or still dabbling?" He used my freelance graphic design work as a punchline. The family held their breath. I looked up from my plate and gave him a small, meek smile. "I'm exploring my options, Dad." I saw the satisfaction in his eyes. He thought I was surrendering. Inside, I was cataloging every hint he'd ever dropped about his investors, his cash flow, his vulnerabilities. I played the part of the disappointing daughter perfectly. As he launched into a story about a big deal, I mentally filed away every detail. His arrogance was his greatest weakness, and I was learning to exploit it. Arthur gave me a name, Julian Wright, the lead private investor in Franklin Holdings. Reaching him directly was impossible. Instead, I contacted his office posing as an independent market researcher studying sustainable furniture brands, Sterling's niche. To my surprise, his assistant scheduled a brief call. Julian was brisk, dismissive. Sterling is a solid performer, he said, sounding bored. Is that all? My heart hammered. I understand Franklin holds the major debt and equity, I said, keeping my voice light. I was reviewing the cap table. The structure of the non-voting silent stake is quite unique. There was a pause. What's your interest in that? He asked, his tone shifting slightly. I took a breath. Let's just say I have a personal connection to those particular shares. I can provide documentation. I used a guest pass from Ellen, who worked in marketing, to observe Sterling's quarterly board meeting from the gallery. My father dominated the room, his voice full of bluster. He presented a new, risky expansion plan. When a junior board member asked about market analysis, my father waved him off. Analysis is for followers. We lead. He mocked the caution, calling it small thinking. I scribbled notes, my hand steady. He was overextending, basing decisions on ego, not data. I saw the worried glances exchanged between the calmer board members. The lead investor, Julian Wright, watched from his seat, his expression unreadable. For the first time, I saw my father not as an invincible giant, but as a man making fragile, arrogant choices. His empire had cracks. With Martin's help, I navigated the legal process. The shares from my grandmother's trust were formally transferred into my name. The paperwork was clear and indisputable. That same week, my father was featured in a business magazine. The headline read, Thomas Sterling, owning the future of design. He boasted about his complete control, his vision. The irony was almost laughable. He was celebrating his supposed ownership while a crucial piece of his financial foundation now legally belonged to the daughter he dismissed. I placed the magazine on my coffee table, a quiet symbol of my secret. The first move was made. He was still oblivious, living in his bubble of superiority. My next step was to find the right moment to pop it. The family gossip mill was churning. At a cousin's birthday party, I overheard snippets. Such a shame, Thomas must be so worried about her. No direction, that's the problem. I stood by the punch bowl, invisible as always. Then Ellen sidled up next to me. You're up to something, she whispered, a playful smile on her lips. You've got that look. The same one you had when you aced a test no one thought you'd pass. I took a sip of punch, saying nothing. She bumped my shoulder gently. Whatever it is, I'm here. Just say the word. Her faith was a boost. Later, as I watched my father hold court across the room, I allowed myself a small, secret smile. They were all whispering about the wrong things. Soon, they'd have something real to talk about. Through Arthur, I was introduced to a small but influential design blog. I suggested they run a critical piece on overexpansion in sustainable brands, using Sterling's new plan as a subtle, unnamed example. The article was published. It was respectful but raised solid questions about risk. I then anonymously forwarded the article to two of the more cautious board members I'd identified. I watched the company's community forums. A slight dip in investor sentiment appeared on niche boards. My father wouldn't see it yet, but Julian Wright would. At our next awful family dinner, my father seemed slightly agitated, complaining about armchair critics. He couldn't pinpoint the source of the pressure, but he felt it. A shadow was rising, and for the first time, he was glancing over his shoulder. The time for subtlety was over. I requested a formal, in-person meeting with Julian Wright, citing the shareholder documentation. His office was all cool glass and steel. Julian, a man in his 60s with sharp eyes, wasted no time. You have 5 minutes, Miss Sterling. I placed the notarized share certificates on his desk. I am the legal owner of the silent equity stake in Franklin Holdings, which translates to an 18% financial interest in Sterling Designs. He picked up the papers, his eyes scanning quickly. The dismissiveness vanished, replaced by focused intensity. He looked from the documents to me. Thomas never disclosed this. Why? His question was direct. I said calmly, that's a question you should ask him. My father summoned me to his office, fury barely contained. Playing games, Nicole? Bothering my investors? He stood behind his massive desk, a king in his castle. This ends now. You have no business here. I remained standing, calm. I have every business here, Dad. I'm a shareholder. He laughed, a harsh, dismissive sound. What, a few grandma stocks? That's a hobby, not a stake. I opened my folder and slid the same documents I'd shown Julian across the polished wood. An 18% financial stake, to be precise. Held in Franklin. His face went pale, then red. He snatched the papers. As he read, his bluster deflated. The office door was slightly ajar. I saw Ellen's shocked face, and behind her, Uncle Frank. The news was already escaping. My father looked up, his eyes wide with a mix of rage and utter confusion. I had never felt more steady. I didn't call a press conference. I organized a casual family brunch at a nice restaurant, inviting my closest relatives and, crucially, Julian Wright. The atmosphere was tense but polite. Over coffee, my father tried to steer the conversation to his latest project. I waited for a lull. Then, I addressed the table, my voice clear. Many of you know there's been some confusion about my role in the family business. To clarify, I recently came into my inheritance from Grandma Eleanor. I paused, feeling all eyes on me. It includes an 18% silent partner stake in Franklin Holdings, the primary funder of Sterling Designs. I looked directly at my father. Dad, as executor, you forgot to mention it. But Julian here has helped me verify everything. The smugness on my father's face shattered like glass. Julian wiped his mouth with a napkin and set it down deliberately. That's correct, he said, his voice carrying authority. The documentation is legally sound. Nicole's stake is substantial and legitimate. He turned his gaze to my father. Thomas, this is a serious oversight. Shareholder transparency is fundamental. My father sputtered. This is a family matter. She doesn't understand what she's holding. I understand its value, I interjected calmly. And my legal right to it. Julian nodded. Precisely. My firm will be recognizing Nicole as the beneficial owner moving forward. The support was public and unambiguous. My father was outmaneuvered in front of his own family. I felt a surge of power, not for revenge, but for validation. My quiet confidence grew roots in that moment. After the brunch, my father stormed into my apartment, something he'd never done before. Enough games, he shouted. You will sign those shares over to me. Today. I'll give you a fair price. He meant a low price, a dismissal. I remained seated. No, I won't. He loomed over me. You'll ruin what I built. You built it with Grandma's capital, which was meant for me, I replied, my voice even. And you've been mismanaging it. Chasing flashy, risky projects instead of solid growth. Julian has the data. His face contorted. He was used to commands, not conversations. You ungrateful girl, he hissed. The emotional threat hung in the air. I didn't flinch. This isn't about gratitude. It's about ownership. We were at a stalemate, and for the first time, he wasn't winning. A week later, an unexpected letter arrived. It was from my father's older brother, Uncle Frank, who was always quiet at family events. He asked to meet for lunch. Nervously, I agreed. Over soup, he spoke softly. I always suspected your father cut corners with Eleanor's estate. He has a way of reshaping facts to fit his narrative. He sighed. I stayed quiet. It was easier. But what he said at that brunch, that was cruel. And seeing you stand up to him, he looked at me, his eyes earnest. I have a small vote on the family trust board. If you ever need a second voice in the room, you have mine. It wasn't a huge power play, but it was crucial. An ally from within his own generation. My father's wall of control had its first visible crack, and it came from his own brother. With Julian's guidance and Uncle Frank's support, I negotiated with the Sterling board. My non-voting shares couldn't give me a direct vote, but significant financial stake carried influence. I proposed a compromise. I would convert a portion of my holding into a special class of shares that gave me observer rights on the financial committee and a say in any decision involving new debt, the area of his risky expansion. The board, wary of my father's impulsiveness, agreed. It was a strategic victory. My father still had operational control, but his financial leash had just shortened. He was sidelined in the very room where money mattered most. At the signing, he glared but remained silent. I left the meeting knowing I had just changed the game completely. He cornered me in the parking garage after the board meeting. The bluster was gone, replaced by a raw, wounded anger. Why are you doing this? To humiliate me? I leaned against my car, calm. You humiliated me, Dad. 4 years. Nothing going for me. No head for business. You said it at brunches, at holidays, in front of everyone. I listed the moments, my voice steady. I'm not doing this for revenge. I'm doing it because it's right. And because I do have a head for business. You just never bothered to look. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. I saw it then, just for a flicker behind the anger, a dawning, horrible realization. He couldn't argue with the truth of my words. The guilt was his to carry, not mine to forgive. Not yet. News travels fast in our world. The family drama became subdued cocktail party talk. My phone buzzed with texts from relatives I barely knew. So proud of you. Always knew you were sharp. Their hypocrisy was almost funny. The ones who had pitted me now praised my shrewdness. At Sterling, a shift occurred. Employees who had only known me as the boss's quiet daughter now looked at me with curious respect. My father felt it. He tried to reassert dominance, barking orders louder, but it rang hollow. The foundation of his unquestioned authority had crumbled. He attempted to call a family meeting to clear the air, but Ellen told me several cousins declined, citing prior commitments. His audience was slipping away. I used my new observer role to propose an idea to the financial committee, redirect a portion of the expansion budget into a robust employee sustainability grant and a customer loyalty program rooted in recycling. It was ethical, good PR, and built long-term brand value over short-term flash. Julian championed it. The committee approved it. My father was forced to implement a plan he didn't create, one that proved more popular with staff and clients than his own. In the press release, my role as a key stakeholder was acknowledged. He had to stand beside me at the announcement, smiling stiffly for the cameras. I was calm, professional. He looked rigid and out of touch. The contrast was telling. He was being outmaneuvered on character, not just legality. He showed up at my door again, but this time he wasn't shouting. He looked tired. Nicole, he said, his voice strained. This company, it's my life's work. Your mother and I, she would have wanted, he was using sentiment, our lost mother, as a final weapon. I felt the old pull of guilt, but my resolve held. Mom would have wanted you to be honest, I said softly. And she would have wanted you to see me. Really see me. This isn't about taking your life's work. It's about you acknowledging that I have a rightful place in it. He had no answer. The emotional leverage he tried to use had no power because my claim wasn't emotional. It was factual, legal, and fair. He left, shoulders slumped, finally understanding he had no cards left to play. At the next all-hands company meeting, my father gave his usual rah-rah speech. During the Q&A, Clara from accounting stood up. She was a 20-year veteran. I'd like to thank the board for the new sustainability grant program, she said. My team has wanted to propose a green initiative for years. It's great to finally be heard. She didn't say my name, but everyone knew. Then, Mark, the head of sales, added, "The customer feedback on the loyalty program is the best we've had in a decade. It's building real community." They were praising my initiatives. I saw my father's loyalists in the room nodding along. The vision they were applauding wasn't his. His credibility, built on force of personality, was eroding in the face of ideas that simply worked better. The final piece fell into place during year-end negotiations. My father, desperate for a win, offered to buy back a slice of my shares at a premium, hoping to reduce my influence. I refused. "I'm not selling," I told him and Julian in the boardroom. "I'm committed to Sterling's future. The ethical direction we're taking is the right one, and it's already showing results." Julian nodded in agreement. My father was stunned into silence. I hadn't taken his money. I had chosen the long-term power of my position and the validity of my ideas over a quick payoff. The ultimate rejection of his worldview. He was left with nothing to fight against but my calm, persistent presence. Poetic justice wasn't a dramatic blow, it was a quiet, unwavering refusal to play by his old, cruel rules. Uncle Frank hosted a small, quiet dinner. Only close family was there. The air was different, respectful, almost cautious around me. Aunt Sylvia finally spoke. "Nicole, we may have underestimated you. We're sorry." Others murmured agreement. I looked around the table. "Thank you," I said. "I didn't do this to prove a point to you, but to myself. But moving forward, respect and fairness have to go both ways." My father sat at the far end, unusually quiet. He didn't apologize. He didn't need to. His silence, his diminished presence, was admission enough. The family had witnessed a reckoning. The dynamic had permanently shifted. I felt no need to gloat. The victory was in the changed atmosphere, in the weight of his unspoken humility. Weeks later, I sat in my home office, the Observer reports from Sterling on my desk. I reflected on the journey from the humiliated daughter at the brunch table to a recognized stakeholder with a voice. It wasn't about tearing my father down. It was about building my own confidence up, brick by brick, using the very tools he said I lacked. He called once, his tone formal, to discuss a routine financial report. I answered with professional clarity. As we hung up, he mumbled, but trailed off. "Goodbye, Dad," I said gently, and ended the call. I didn't need him to finish the sentence. The work was done. I looked out the window, a genuine smile on my face. My story wasn't about his downfall, but about my rise. And that was the most satisfying victory of all.